Hey friends, did you know that Feminist Frequency recently launched the Games and Online Harassment Hotline? Well, we sure did. It is a confidential, text-based emotional support resource for folks who make and play games. You can learn more at gameshotline.org, and please, please help us spread the word so we can reach the people who need it the most.
What these men have is practically nothing, but you see the joy on these men's faces as they eat these oily cakes, right? And it's not like, they're buying 2 dozen and eating them one after another. It's like just one. Like, I have the money for just one, and this is transporting me. I don't know. I found it so beautiful in a way.
Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio. This is the show that asks you to be critical of the media you love. I'm Anita, and I'm joined today by 2 women who sneak out every night to steal milk from their neighbors' cows. Carolyn Pettit.
Gotta do what you gotta do.
And Ebony Adams.
Do you like my oily cakes or not?
I mean,
you do. So
they
that
do look
require
really
milk.
good.
Yeah.
This week we're going to be talking about First Cow. Stay tuned. Hello, friends.
Hello.
Hey.
Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge the time. It is currently Monday, November 2nd, which means that tomorrow will be Tuesday, November 3rd. And that means that you will be listening to this on Wednesday, November 4th or later.
Okay, that was
what
good.
Does that mean?
I confirm your math checks out.
What does that mean?
We don't know what it means.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, this is a really stressful week. It's been stressful leading up to it. It's stressful in this moment. Tomorrow is the U.S. election, which could go so many ways. And I suspect we will not know who the next president is at the end of tomorrow. So when this comes out on Wednesday morning, we just want to acknowledge that we recorded this previous to all of the things that are going to happen in the next 48 hours. And we thought that this was an interesting movie to tie to this week because of, it's sort of situatedness in the growth of this country.
Yeah.
The sort of founding of the things that we consider to be like the West and California and the West Coast and America and all that. So yeah, just how's that for a preface?
Love it.
Great. Do you 2 have any thoughts that you want to share before we dive in?
Yeah, we have a lot of international listeners. Are you going to be opening your homes to people like me? Should the case, things not go so well? It's important to note that,
can we have a threesome marriage so I can get you both into Canada with me?
Yeah, let's try it out. Let's try it out.
What if I become Mormon? Then do I legally get to marry both of you?
I don't know. B, I feel like this is an offensive conversation. C, even if it were true, I feel like maybe that might be open within the faith to men having multiple spouses. But I don't think that's the way to go. But listen, I know we have at least some listeners in Scandinavia.
Well, we're not going to have any more Mormon listeners, that's for sure.
I know, right? Jesus.
Sorry.
We can afford to lose anybody. But no, seriously, I have reached, my anxiety levels have been so high this entire year. I honestly feel kind of numb right now. I don't think I'm feeling the kind of gut churning anxiety that a lot of folks are feeling because I've already tapped out. The bile has already eaten its way through all my internal organs. I have nothing left.
Yeah.
I feel, sorry, Carolyn.
Oh, no. It's, I would just wanted to sort of echo that because, last night a friend asked me how, I'm feeling. And I had this realization that while intellectually I'm very, panicked really, or stressed about the week ahead and kind of worrying over all the different permutations and ways it could go. And is he going to declare victory, tomorrow night, despite not, and try to toss out, hundreds of thousands of legitimate ballots and so on, or what, just all the different kind of nightmare scenarios. I also had that realization of my anxiety level has been so plateaued throughout so much of 2020 that even though some part of me feels like, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you even more anxious now? Like that this is happening, like just emotionally, that's not happening, which does not in any way mean that I'm not deeply concerned and deeply worried. It's just that there isn't the capacity for my emotions to like shift to reflect, that concern, because 2020 has been a nonstop, buffet of anxiety.
Yeah.
I'm very comforted by what both of you said, actually, because this morning I was checking in with my accountability buddy about what we were going to get done this week. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to email anyone or ask anything of anyone this week, just on principle of how difficult it is. And so I was like, maybe I'll use this time to like get some stuff done that I wouldn't otherwise have time, because, whatever, I'm not like that stressed about this. Like I don't feel actively stressed. So like hearing you both be like, yeah, whatever. But
I wouldn't characterize it quite as whatever.
I know. I know. But like there is a sense that I've just been sitting with like, whatever. Like I am very well educated on all of the permutations of all of the possibilities of everything that could go. Well, not all of them, but many of them, right?
Yeah.
But then as I started talking, I was like, that this isn't true. Like this is a story that I have just told myself, right? That I have to like, it doesn't matter for me, and that I should be there for my friends who need it. And I was like, no, I do too. Like this is a lot to take in. And while I'm not planning on watching the shit show of like all the different polls and all the kind of crap that's going to come out during the day tomorrow, that's not going to be useful for anybody. It doesn't mean that the results of this election aren't going to be profound in like some really deeply existential ways,
Yeah. I mean, my part of, I think, of my seeming equanimity right now is that for me, like the worst has already happened, like we've been living through the worst for 4 years now. And no matter what the results wind up being, after Tuesday's election, we have to do so much work right. as progressives, and we have to find a way to really, heal some ruptures and, root out some cancers, that are not going to go away, regardless of, if there were a landslide victory for, Biden tomorrow. Nevertheless, all of those people who have taken to the streets and gotten left in the streets after his rallies, they are still in our neighborhoods. They are still at our grocery stores. They are still out there wishing for our eradication.
Yeah, absolutely.
So like,
and not only that though, like that's 100% true. But there's also like one of my big fears is the people, the moderates, the moderate Democrats or whatever, who have that like, once Biden wins, I can go back to brunch mentality.
Oh, fuck yeah,
and
exactly.
Like that's I can check out. I've had to think about politics for these past 4 years. Once Biden wins, I can finally stop thinking about politics again. And I'm just like, please God, please don't stop caring.
Yeah,
if Biden
that
wins,
happens every time a Democrat gets into office.
Yeah,
without fail. Like every fucking time, right? That like
I know.
Leftists and liberals are enraged when there's a Republican in office, and then they just like check out, or they just think that the candidate does no wrong.
I guess I'm
right?
just exactly. I guess I'm just hoping that the crisis this past year in particular, that the virus has brought about how it's illuminated all the cracks that were already there in capitalism, in our in so many systems. Which many of us were suffering under, like, well before Trump. Like, right, we were not comfortable and safe. I was not before Trump, or like under Obama. It's not like things were hunky dory for me all the time. Like, I just hope that that people now understand that, like, status quo. More people understand. There will of course, be those who absolutely check out and want to stop worrying. I just hope more people realize that status quo, kind of neoliberal democratic politics are they're not cut out for this era. Like we need, they're not going to cut it as far as facing our climate crises, our economic crises, and so on. And so, I mean, like that's like, so it's like, yes, even if Biden wins, like there's so many problems tied up in that. It's a better position to be starting from, but it's by no means like okay, we're done, everyone. We can all go home now and relax, like job's done.
Yeah. I'm just imagining, I just flashed to the future and put myself in the position of one of our audience members listening to this on, Wednesday or Thursday or whatever, and being like, oh boy, those assholes had no idea how bad it could get, like if the streets are on fire. Yeah. And,
they very well could be.
Oh, like I'm very anticipating.
Yeah, like highly anticipating a lot of horror happening in our streets. Yeah. I yesterday drove to Orange County, and on the freeway, there was a caravan of about a dozen, maybe more trucks driving in the slow lane fairly slowly for the rate that traffic was going, with giant Trump flags. Yeah. And it looked like they were just driving up and down the freeway, like getting off, like spending the day, I would assume, in the way that they were operating, just like driving around with their Trump flags and honking. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, y'all, I don't know why you think California is this big bastion of liberalness. Like, this was, 45 minutes out of LA. Like, it's not, come on. And then, it was just, it was very uncomfortable and disconcerting. And it also reminded me of how, like, lucky I am to live in a neighborhood that I can assume doesn't have that many Trump supporters. Like, I can assume that I can openly have a conversation about, like, how horrible he is in a coffee shop, and when those things existed before, and, like, not be a potential target. Like, Carolyn, after the last election, you were with me and two of our friends at a restaurant the next day, just being like, what the fuck happened? Yeah. And I remember saying the same thing of, like, and it was in San Francisco, and just feeling like we can openly have this conversation here. And I feel like there are so many places in this country that you can't do that, or you wouldn't feel safe doing that.
Yeah.
I don't know how I got on that tangent.
Well, no. I mean, the threat of violence.
We'll check in.
Yeah. The threat of violence is very real. And I mean, Trump, brings that out. Like, he encourages it. He emboldens it. After the, like, Biden-Harris bus was run out of Texas by a similar kind of caravan of pickup trucks flying Trump flags, it's like, at this point, we don't even expect him to kind of to make a statement like, we must have a free and fair election, and I condemn the actions of my supporters who drove. We don't even expect him to do that, because we know that this is who he is and this is what he wants. And in fact, he did tweet, like, saying they didn't do anything wrong, but Antifa, we need to crack down on Antifa. Like, it's so obvious, like, who he is and what he wants.
So yeah, future you. I don't know. We might. You might laugh at us and send us messages about how stupid this whole conversation was, but there you go. This is where we're at on Monday. Okay, let's jump into today's topic. So every so often, Ebony and I like to take pity on Carolyn and really give her something to sink her critical teeth into. Today's food for Carolyn's soul comes via the spare, unhurried storytelling within director Kelly Reichardt's 2019 film, First Cow. Set in the 1820s in the Oregon Territory, First Cow unfolds gradually, telling the story of two men trying to make their way in the harsh, often unforgiving frontier. Into this bleak vista, the two men bring a spot of light and sweetness and memory, and all through the simple pleasures of sweet cakes made with stolen milk. What a story. Yeah. The film is based on the novel The Half-Life, written by Freq Reichardt collaborator and the writer of Meek's Cutoff and Wendy and Lucy, Jonathan Raymond.
So, first of all, I want to say, like, regarding, yes, this is absolutely a Caro movie, as,
I have been so looking forward to hearing the Caro drop on this Caro movie.
But I want to say, like, I acknowledge that and I embrace that. But at the same time, I do want to encourage listeners who maybe, like, who maybe feel like, oh, well, that's not for me, like, or whatever. I mean, this is a film. First of all, I really believe that, the pleasures of kind of art house cinema, some people think of them as, like, kind of elitist, or like you need to be some sort of highbrow intellectual or whatever to enjoy them. A big thing for me is, like, I really believe that the pleasures of cinema like this are not like some elitist thing. I think they're available to everybody. And so, and this is a film that, I'm not like some lone voice championing it. This is a film that so many people have found like delightful and beautiful and have really appreciated and celebrated this year. But gosh, like where to start with this film? Part of what's fascinating to me about this film is that on the surface, it could hardly be simpler, right? Narratively, it is such a simple story. Like if you were to sum up the plot of this film for somebody, it would be very basic. Like there's, but in that simplicity, I see like so much depth and like insight into capitalism and power and, our notions of American history and, and so many other things. Like I really think that this is a film that its simplicity is almost deceptive, because when you stop and you think about what happens in this film, there's so much going on there. So like, I guess I'm struggling to even figure out where to start talking, because I feel like there's just so much I love about this movie. But
I loved this movie too. And even though we give you shit for it, I also love what we are now calling Caro movies. Like I believe that is the industry standard term. And I really enjoyed this one too. And what I appreciated was not just the filmmaking itself, which is absolutely superb, but the experience that it forced upon me, which is that this is not something, despite how slow and measured and deliberate it is, this is not something that you want to turn away from. It's not something that you want to watch while you're on your phone or while you're doing the dishes. It demands immediacy, in the viewing of it. At the very same time that you're watching, this unfolding narrative that, there's if you turn your head away for a moment, it's not as if you're going to miss like, a Marvel like fight scene or something, you're not going to miss like a crucial, plot point, but nevertheless, it is truly immersive. And I found that so wonderful in a historical moment in which I am struggling to maintain, interest in anything for more than 10 minutes at a time. I really, enjoyed falling into this movie at the same time that it maintained such really awful tension for me, because it opens, and we sort of know the end from the very beginning. And so knowing how it's going to turn out, seeing how hard these men's lives are, how much they are struggling, and just praying that they can find some way that I misunderstood what that opening scene, portended. Like I loved watching this movie, and I loved the way that it forced a physical reaction in me, and the physical reaction was to sit still and let it wash over me.
Yeah, I mean, I discovered Kelly Reichardt's films this year. And for me, definitely like as a just tonal, like what's fascinating is that her films are often concerned with people on the margins. In this film, Cookie and King Lu are the two main characters. Definitely are like on the margins of their like frontier society. She has another film, Wendy and Lucy, which stars Michelle Williams as a woman who, in modern day America, who like only has basically to her name her car and her dog. She's, like truly on the margins of modern day society. And she's like trying to make it her way up to like Alaska for a little work. And then she loses her dog. And anyway, it's this whole like just deep human drama about a woman who loses her dog. But like this film and like Certain Women, which is a wonderful, wonderful film I encourage people to check out. Like I find the pacing and the attention to landscapes and to like natural beauty, which really comes through in this movie, such an antidote to like the panic and anxiety and the hectic, just the 24/7 nightmare news cycle and everything. Like there's something grounding and calming for me about these films, even as they are about people like struggling with like really truly like massive problems and predicaments. But like, so, okay. Our visions of frontier America and like Westerns, right? Like typically they're so often, first of all, they don't depict like the diversity of America, like as it was then or as it is now, right? I mean, they're overwhelmingly white. And if there are black people, they're usually pretty much, often just slave narratives or what have you. Like, this is a film set in frontier America that the two main characters are a white man and a Chinese man who strike up a, what we might call an unlikely friendship. Although the film doesn't even treat it as like unlikely particularly. And the camp too, like we see populating the camp, we see a diversity of people. Also our notions of the American West, they tend to be very romanticized, right? It's often gunslingers and sheriffs and bandits and these kind of tropes that dominate our idea of the Western and Western life. And even when we get a film that is hailed as subversive, like say Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven, like that's just a film about, well, being a gunslinger and killing people is actually really like hard and bad, but it's the same kind of basic narrative, just like twisted a bit. This film, I mean, the way that it's about like what we might call, ordinary people, for lack of a better term off the top of my head. I mean, and just the ordinary kind of rhythms of their life is, to me, first of all, it's almost radical in terms of how it departs from the images of that time that cinema almost always gives us, right? And this is like, this too is America. Like, I don't know. So what I find fascinating about this film, so many things, but is that in this film, because of that friendship at its core and the dream that the two of them pursue, and the way it is tragically, like ultimately foiled, we sort of see in this film both like what America is, like how they are limited by power dynamics and capitalism and everything, and we see like what it could be. Like we see the potential and the possibility, just like in the fact of their friendship and like all of these people sort of coexisting and living together in this frontier town. It's go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Anita.
So I was neutral positive on this. Like I didn't hate it. It is very slow. It is extremely slow, but it held my attention for a while. Like it took a minute before I like picked up my phone and then was like, wait, no, pay attention to the movie. And I was immediately interested in like the situatedness of Cookie, right? Like I think they did a really good job of like, okay, nobody likes him, who he's traveling with. He's sort of an underdog. He's sensitive in a lot of ways, right?
Yes.
Like he's not really tortured as much as just like he hasn't had a great life, and he's just like kind of trying to make his way, and he doesn't want to like cause problems, and like he's easy to get. He gets bullied a lot, right? And he just kind of takes it.
Yeah, he has a fundamental kind of kindness or decency to him that is at odds with like what other men and what that society maybe sort of expects or demands, right? In some ways.
Absolutely. And I loved that as like the star of this movie in a lot of ways. And the other piece of it that I really enjoyed was that I loved the intimacy and domesticity of Cookie and King Lou, right?
Yes.
Like that it was very intimate. They were very domestic together. And it showed like a very close male friendship, right? Yeah. There was never a like, are they fucking or not? Like, no, it's not even in this world. It's just like, this is a harsh world, and we found someone that I'm compatible with and can like spend a lot of time with and, plan with and think about the future with. And like, I really, really enjoyed that. Right. And when they both slept at the very beginning, they both sleep in a tent together. Yeah. And I was like, oh, this isn't going to go well. Like they're going to wake up and then it's going to be a whole thing and this is going to be bad. And like that's not this movie. Like my fears around homophobia and masculinity were like not this movie.
Yes. And violence too. Like it does not deny violence as a component of life on the frontier. You know, King Lu tells Cookie early on a story about his friend, you know, a friend of his being murdered, and you know, Cookie and King Lu's fate ultimately is violent, but because of that opening framing device, which to me ultimately, you know, it makes the film, it changes the film, it makes it suspenseful in terms of like, oh God, how does that end up happening? Rather than what's going to happen, it's like, how do we end up there? And then like the way it ends with that peaceful image and doesn't even need to show us what happens because we already know because of the opening is so great.
If you haven't seen the movie, like you don't know what we're talking about, but I think we should just not say what it is because for folks who might actually want to check it out. Because I was really pleased with where they didn't go at the end.
Right.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to just share really quick about the domesticity part. Well, actually, the fear. The second time I felt that worry that something was going to happen was in the bar where the man was like, "Watch my baby while I go do this fight." I was like, "Oh my God, the baby! Somebody's going to have the baby, and then he's going to get killed for it." And like I was just like, "That's not this movie." But I just kept feeling like these moments of tension were coming up to like.
And that's to me is actually a wonderful hallmark of Kelly Reichardt's films. I Certain Women, which is I think the film she made prior, like immediately prior to this, which is set in contemporary, you know, America. It stars Laura Dern and Michelle Williams and Kristen Stewart and Lily Gladstone, who has a small part in this as like as the wife, the woman who's Native American and who translates between people. Anyway, she has a much bigger part in Certain Women, and she's wonderful. But that too is a film where you notice it, like there are these scenarios where in a like cinema has trained us to expect, like for instance, oh, there's a gun, like oh it's going to go off and there's going to be violence, things are going to happen, you know, and it's just sidesteps that at every turn. Like it's just not that kind of cinema. It's not that kind of story. And like, to me, it's there's something just so refreshing about like having those expectations not be fulfilled of like, oh, we're going to get at least a little bit of like an action sequence or some violence is going to break out. No, I mean, you know, not necessarily
So just really quick, sorry.
No.
The scene so there's this scene that happens that is too long, but it's beautiful. And it's it's right after the baby moment that I was just talking about, where King Lu brings Cookie back to his little shack for a drink, and King Lu goes out to chop wood, and Cookie like doesn't know what to do with himself, and so he starts like sweeping and like cleaning the house, and he goes out to get flowers to like have fresh flowers in the home. And that was also when I realized that I don't know if it's the director's vision or like more the cinematographer's vision, but they use window frames, door frames, mirror frames a lot in this movie. And that was the first time I really noticed that in this scene, because you see Cookie like cleaning in the house and being domestic, and you see King Lu outside like really struggling with chopping wood. Yeah. And just like the camera doesn't really move, right? It's just like watching these two people exist in real time. And there was something really beautiful about that.
There's few things I love, you know, in cinema more than films that just like observe their characters. And for me, so like obviously that's something I really appreciate about this film, is when it's not concerned with moving the plot forward, but just giving us those moments of let's just be with these characters for a bit.
I did not like.
Yes.
I didn't like how the indigenous folks were just kind of background for most of it.
Sure.
And you know, it's not a story about them. It's a story about these two men. But it like, I just kept expecting there to be more or some conversation, but like all the indigenous people we met were basically like indentured to or slaves of or working for the rich white dude.
Yeah. But I mean, and that's totally a valid criticism. But I think the film is, deeply concerned with that powerful white dude's power and like how it works and how it functions and how imbalanced everything is.
Absolutely.
To me, this film is really at heart like about capitalism and the rules of what is, for instance, like, it's illegal, right, for Cookie, or it's against, I don't know if there was an established law in Oregon at that time, but I mean, it's a violation of like, of the law in a sense for Cookie and King Lou to steal the milk from the cow. And yet it's perfectly valid, and quote unquote legal for the man who owns the cow to have just tremendous wealth and power relative to everyone else, in that sort of town and situation. And I kept thinking about like how, today, right, we talk about, it's sort of illegal or whatever, like people who are oppressed and who maybe, riot and like steal a TV from a Walmart or whatever are like demonized by the politicians and the crackdown on by the police or whatever. But I mean, what about in my mind anyway, just like obscene scale looting perpetrated by Jeff Bezos and the Walton family and whatever, like stealing the wealth of the employees who generate that wealth for them by doing that work every day, just to obscene degrees. Like Cookie and King Lou they talk about, King Lou even says at one point, like when they're talking about how do we make this happen, or a crime, like he uses the word a crime, but wonderful things come out of that crime, right? These cakes that everyone enjoys, that bring back, that look so delicious and made me super hungry the first time I watched this film. I wanted them so bad. And, but like how much art, how much creativity, how much wonderful, beautiful stuff is not made or done because the people who could do it are locked out of the opportunity of doing it because the resources are hoarded by like the rich and powerful, And oh my God, and there are conversations about the conversations between there's like another character who comes and visits, and they talk about like disciplining workers,
oh my
right?
God.
And I mean, how relevant is all of that, right? Mm-hmm. This talk about how dehumanizing to laborers, right? I mean, one of them says it's Chief Factor. Chief Factor is like the name of the big man in town, right? And he talks about sometimes, yeah, you might lose the labor from that employee if you kill them, but think how motivating that will be to everyone else. It's just this raw calculation of how do we get the most labor out of our workforce, and it doesn't matter how much we have to dehumanize them, how much violence we have to exact on them, if we have to kill some of them. It's just a raw, calculation for them. So infuriating and yet so relevant and to how these systems have always functioned and continue to function.
It was I'm struck while watching the film by the reminders of how much back-breaking, exhaustive labor goes into being poor and just surviving on a day-to-day basis. Cookie is the cook for these trappers at the beginning of the film. Once that particular, gig is done, he ends up at this fort. That's where he, re-meets King Lou, and where this, idea kicks off to steal the milk from the titular first cow in the territory. But I was just thinking there was a, after one of the times when we see Cookie and King Lou head to go, steal the milk, and the scenes between Cookie and the cow are so sweet, and so gentle, but, I'm thinking okay, so they're sneaking out in the middle of the night to do this. And then he's got to get up early and, prep the stuff to make these cakes. And then they have to walk the mile to the fort. and set up and then, cook on site and whatever. And it's just like we're making enough money to survive that day. And we need to keep doing this, And everyone around us, except for Chief Factor, is in the same position. It is this true like subsistence kind of economy. Like there's nothing extraneous here. We don't have the money or the resources or the time to procure, anything extra. It's really about, do I have enough to eat today? Do I have enough warm boots to get me through this winter? And so when we see like the money that they do start to make, the excess from selling those, the cakes, and you see like the diversity of the currency, right? So there's some paper money, there's some silver money, there's some coppers, there's some shells, there's some buttons, everything, like this sense of like, what is the actual true value of things? Like, it's a question that this movie, keeps asking us to ask of ourselves. And it also asks us like, what is truly necessary for like a moment of happiness? Like what these men have is practically nothing, but you see the joy on these men's faces as they eat these oily cakes, right? And it's not like, they're buying 2 dozen and eating them one after another. It's like just one, like I have the money for just one. And this is transporting me. I don't know. I found it so beautiful in a way, the way that like the film asks us to recognize the ways that we're, in our current moment, we have surrounded ourselves with so many things and so much noise. But when you strip away to the essentials, how much, truer some of our pleasures can be.
Yeah, I think that's a strength of Reichardt's filmmaking, or that's a good way of thinking about it too, is that it cuts away a lot of unessential stuff to focus on maybe the things that in doing that other things come to the forefront, and we as viewers can focus on things that maybe often in the hands of another filmmaker would get kind of lost in the noise of showiness or a story that was trying to do too much or what have you.
Mm-hmm. I kept wanting, like, even though knowing that this is not the answer and like all the points that you are all bringing up, like, yes, absolutely. I just kept wanting them to go to Chief Factor and like strike a deal so that they could keep making the cakes, right? Being like, I'll cut you in on this. Like, I'll cut you in on this. And then like, but then that just perpetuates all of the problems.
And I thought about that.
And it wouldn't have worked.
And like how, like, there's no way he would cut them a fair deal, right? Like it would be a situation where he, as capitalists, as like the billionaires of today, or what, he's relative, like his wealth is so much greater than everyone else's. Like it's always, they get the lion's share of wealth, right? And so like the only way they can harbor those dreams of we can go to San Francisco and start up like a hotel or, whatever, all the wonderful kind of little dreams that they talk about is by doing it outside of the again, the law, or what passes for the law at that time and place.
Yeah, be gay, do crimes. I'm super into it. Can we talk about how King Lou would not shut up, and I loved it.
Oh my God.
There are moments like this film is not like a dirge. It is, there are moments of real lightness in it.
Oh yeah.
And the fact that like King Lou as a character just constantly he's that character who's like, and then we could do this, and I've been thinking about, if we sold these for $3 for $1, if we go to San Francisco, let's go and take this scene. He just not, and so like his constant recitative, like he's like a chorus, like a Greek chorus that never stops for Cookie. And there are occasional moments where you can see Cookie like betraying just the slightest hint of irritation, but it's so like natural, and that it would never occur to him to leave this nascent friendship that he has developed with this man. I loved that, but King Lou as a figure is great.
Yeah,
and I want to go back a little bit to what you were saying, Anita, about you weren't really sure about the film's treatment of like the indigenous populations in the area, right? Because there's something so interesting about King Lou as a figure, as this Chinese man, in one of his endless monologues, telling Cookie that they're lucky to be in the place where they are now because history has not started yet. And what, of course, he means is there's a certain kind of civilization that has not been inflicted upon the land. And so history via that civilization has not started yet. But it completely ignores the people who lived there before and the way that they organized their societies, right? It's so interesting to have King Lu be the voice of this kind of attitude as a Chinese person, and to be able to comment upon both white society, but also as being an outsider who's also more of an insider than the indigenous population there, and subject to profound racism, in these frontier towns. But I just found him so fascinating, and I found what the film was trying to wrestle with this issue, of when does history start and when does human marking upon the land start to matter. I found it really interesting that the film starts in the modern era with Alia Shawkat as, woman with the dog, traipsing around this landscape. And we see a large ship that goes by. We hear a train in the distance. So these all mark the fact that it's in the present, right? And then suddenly we're in the past in the 1820s and the land looks the same. And I just found it so beautiful, this suggestion that what men may do, what humans will do, has such a brief effect on this larger existence, humans change, but the land ultimately doesn't, not in any real way. And of course, you can throw in ideas of climate change and whatever. And, there's mention of overtrapping of the beavers in the film. But I just found the film's wide shots contribute to this too, this sense of this vast life, but that we only start to take note of it and treasure it when certain kinds of humans make certain kinds of marks upon it. And then we start to take note of it,
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that King Lu, he has seen he mentions that he's seen the pyramids and he's been to, I think, London, he mentions London and things like this, right? And so for him, those are clear markers of history has happened in those places, right?
Right.
And for Cookie though, Cookie's well, this place seems old to me because Cookie, Cookie doesn't have that, he hasn't traveled the world like King Lu has, but he also doesn't have those particular notions of history and there's an interesting.
Yeah, and there's another thing King Lu says when talking about Chief Factor. He says, he's so obsessed with London and Paris. What kind of woman is he?
Yeah.
This very interesting moment. And then men like us, Cookie, we have to make our own way. It's very interesting, that this man who's in, as Anita, as this very intimate domestic arrangement with another man, says something about another male figure. And I think, in many ways, the film does ask us to hold a certain kind of masculinity, in opposition to other kinds of masculinity. And I don't think it's very forgiving of either. And I think there were moments at the beginning of the movie where I just thought, this is like a horror film. If I was traveling with these trappers, I would seriously go off in the woods by myself and ask to get eaten by a bear. These men are terrible, and so many of them are terrible. But yeah, again, just found it so interesting. King Lu, such a great character. So interesting.
Totally. I would love to take more of this conversation into the bonus.
Yeah.
Bonus.
Because I have a couple more thoughts and I think that there's a little bit more we can chew into. But before that, speaking of chewing, which was a weird analogy and I don't know why I said that, bite into would have been better. It's fine. Apparently Dan Kwa from Slate made the oily cakes from First Cow and stole milk and shared a recipe. So I'm going to link that if you want to make your own oily cakes. They involve a lot of lard, so no wonder they're delicious.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All right, we will be right back with some freakouts. You know something you can do today? You can head over to patreon.com/femfreak and become one of our patrons. That's right. If you back this podcast, not only are you helping us keep it on the air and keep feminist critical media criticism alive, but you also get loads of fun perks like early access to podcast episodes, very special bonus episodes, merch discounts. What else you got? We even let our patrons help us decide on new episodes and upcoming topics. So go ahead and check that out. Patreon.com/femfreak. Now it's time to talk about what's been thrilling us, moving us, upsetting us, or infuriating us this past week. Carolyn, why don't you get us started?
Sure. So this is not like a rave. I'm not like, oh, this is amazing. It's just something I thought was kind of interesting that I'll briefly share with folks. So a week ago today, we recorded our episode on the Witches of Eastwick. And reading the Wikipedia article for that, I saw it made a passing mention of it mentioned in passing that apparently Bill Murray was originally maybe going to play the role that Jack Nicholson wound up playing. So a week ago tonight, I watched the new film by Sofia Coppola, which is on Apple TV, and it's called On the Rocks. Sofia Coppola famously worked with Bill Murray in for her, kind of breakout. Well, I guess she had made The Virgin Suicides prior to that, but for Lost in Translation. And, here she reunites with him. And it's a film. On the Rocks is a film starring Rashida Jones as a woman who suspects that her husband might be cheating on her. And so she sort of enlists her dad, or really her dad kind of enlists her in a series of capers designed to determine if he actually is, if he is cheating on her and whatnot. And the interesting connection with the Witches of Eastwick is that, in the Witches of Eastwick, as we talked about last week, the devil character, Daryl Van Horn, is constantly saying these kind of very gender essentialist things, like women are like this, men are like this. And in On the Rocks, Bill Murray as Felix, as Rashida Jones's, character, as Laura's dad, is constantly basically telling Laura, well, he probably is cheating on you because this is what men do. This is how men are. And, she doesn't exactly buy it. She's kind of rolls her eyes and everything, and the film doesn't endorse it, but it's just a character trait of his. I found it a pleasurable film. Part of it is I just think Bill Murray is so fascinating to watch. Even, more as he gets older, I find his face so just fascinating to look at. I think he just looks it's just a great movie face. It's got so much character. There is this sort of sense in which it's a kind of, for me, it's a bit of a comforting film because these are people of privilege and, their lives are, for whatever their problems are, they do have somewhat cushy lives relative to me. And there's a way in which Sofia Coppola is very good at just conveying the atmosphere of privilege. And so for me, I'm an escape from the realities of my own life. It's a charming, little film. It's a beautiful little ode to New York. It's complicated with regard to the Felix character and a lot of the ideas he spouts about gender and stuff. I enjoyed it as a pleasant little escape from my own life for a bit.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah.
I kept saying ads for it, and I was like, oh my God, I really hope that this is not a romantic relationship.
Oh God, no.
Because Hollywood is so gross sometimes.
No, yeah.
So yeah, that's a relief.
Yeah.
I would like to freak out about a book that I read called The Library Book by Susan Orlean. and it is fucking amazing. It's a really, really good read. She is so poetic and thoughtful, and
Susan Orlean from The Orchid Thief? Susan,
yeah.
Same right? Okay.
Yeah. Her writing is just it's so lyrical and rhythmic. And this book in particular is about Los Angeles, and more specifically about the Los Angeles library system. So in April of 1986, there was a huge fire that occurred in the Central Library of downtown Los Angeles, and it raged for like 7 hours, and it had huge consequences for the library. And so as the book is themed around this fire and the mystery around the fire, it goes back in time from like the beginning of the Los Angeles library system, all of the wackadoodle figures that like ran this library, like where it even started. It goes into the history of the man who was accused of starting the fire, who was also a fascinating character. Oh, wow. It goes back and forth in time. It goes back and forth between her like spending a lot of time at the library, what the status of libraries are today, right? That they have shifted a lot from literally being a place where you check out books to some of the only places in which folks who don't have homes or don't have access to other services can go to. And so the libraries have become a lot more of a social service. And so that she really uncovers and talks about that tension in the context of both the history and the future of what libraries can be, and what some people think they should be. It's just, it's magnificent. The book is magnificent. And I got it from the library. I got it from the library, and it was kind of difficult to read this book and all of the descriptions of the downtown library, which I've never been to like listen to what it used to look like, listen to what it is now, listen to the way people talk about it and the librarians that she interviewed talk about it, and not be able to go there. Like every ounce of my soul wanted, as I was reading this book, wanted to go visit the fucking library just to like be in this room while I was taking in this history and everything that happened in this space and all the people who came through it and like how it got to be what it is. So when libraries reopen safely, I am going to go take a visit to the downtown Central Los Angeles Library just to sort of like pay homage to this like amazing history that I just read about.
Yeah.
So yeah, highly, highly recommend this book. It was delightful. Awesome. Before we end this episode, I want to just quickly acknowledge our conversation that Ebony and I had in the last episode of our show about the NXIVM sex cult and the differences between the two documentaries, The Vow versus Seduced. At the time, Ebony had watched 2 episodes of Seduced, which is the documentary on Stars, and I had watched all of The Vow, which was the documentary on HBO Max. I have since watched the available episodes of Seduced, and like I'm fucking pissed at how much The Vow like didn't get into it. Like, and I really needed to like say that to all of you who like listened to that episode where I was just like, oh yeah, and then this and then that. Like, the Seduced has a very specific perspective, which allowed, because it is from a survivor that was entrenched deeply into DOS, which was the sex cult part of NXIVM, which I don't think that they had explicit access to of a bunch of that knowledge. The creators of Vow didn't have it. But what I'm mad about is that there were definitely things that were more public, that were known by the people that were interviewed and worked on The Vow. And like, it felt like The Vow feels like this cheery little slap on the wrist in comparison to what you learn really fucking happened through Seduced. And I know that documentaries both have perspectives and like they're, you know, like all things subjective, but like it is absolutely horrifying. And I like every episode that I watch of Seduced, I'm more and more like, I did not learn anything from The Vow. Like it's like watching a completely different film about like totally different people, although it is the same people.
Everyone I know who's seen them both is having a similar reaction to you, Anita. Well, I mean, there are some people who are like, okay, I think the vow is useful or interesting because it takes a softer approach. It takes its time sort of trying to, effectively like convey how someone can be, duped, can be brought into a cult, so it kind of mirrors the work that the cult itself does. But, Seduce doesn't waste any time on that. Like, they're very clear from the very beginning. Keith Raniere and everyone who enabled him and everyone who participated with him is culpable in profoundly evil acts. And, the lines were blurred between victim and victimizer, for some of these people. But the fact is, horrific things happened to people under the guise of, education and enlightenment from this, just Svengali fuckhead. And you could leave the vow thinking like, oh, I'd like to hear Keith Raniere's, side of things. And that's what the vow promises, right? At the end of season 1, they're like, come back for season 2. We're going to have Keith Raniere's statement. The Seduced will have you
why would
questioning
you give
your
him
commitment to prison abolition. Like, I heard this man got 120 years and I was like, good, bury that motherfucker under the jail. He is evil. Just so evil.
Yeah. So here's a couple of things from the vow that I like. So again, I believe that they didn't have the insider information that we get out of Seduced, but Mark Vicente, first of all, one of the people in Sarah, whatever her name is, was in DOS and both was a slave and had slaves. Mm-hmm. Like, she was a part of that whole orbit. The other thing is that the thing that really gets me, and I remember feeling awkward about this when I watched The Vow, is there was like the one episode about gender stuff. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, it was the one episode that really got into SOP, the men's group, and Jeunesse, the women's group. And I was like, man, you saved that for like, what, the 7th episode? And like, you didn't really even hint at this shit before. And then you like moved past it real quick. Like, I was horrified watching that episode and was also a little bit like, you're burying the lead here, y'all. Like, what the fuck? And so when you see in Seduced, the words coming out of Keith Raniere's mouth in those sessions that are open to the community, those were not hidden secretly through text messages and DOS. Those were out in the open. And the things that they were saying about sexual abuse, about I'm not even going to say the things I'm going to say. He was uttering very horrific things about gender, about sexual assault, and what that means to the audiences of the people that we have come to empathize with in The Vow and feel bad for in The Vow. And I'm just like, y'all, like, it's one thing to have been stuck in that. And like, I do have compassion for getting sucked in and having and being stuck in it. But like, why didn't that make it in your fucking documentary? Right? Like, at the end of the day, as you're processing all of this, why didn't that make it there? Yeah. So I don't know.
And I don't know, because like I said, I haven't seen The Vow, but I'm also hearing that the cult experts in Seduced
there's
are better.
One.
Yeah. And we get like very useful, very important information from these people in Seduced. And they're like, this is how cults work. They do X, Y, Z, blah, blah, blah. And of course, the very fascinating discussion where they're like, what do they call it? Self-sealing, whereby when you're in a cult, you replicate and police the beliefs, and you police yourself and your own behavior. So like, you can be away from the leaders and other members of the cult, but you have been so effectively brainwashed that you now police yourself, like, it was fascinating and just so sad. It's for only 4 episodes. People watch it.
Yeah, The Vow doesn't have a lot of external voices coming in, right? It has the one guy that always wears a black turtleneck or whatever. Like, he's in both of them. But then there are like other cult experts in Seduce that give a lot of really great context. You have some therapists who are in there talking about shit. You have the lead prosecutor being interviewed, talking about like, the context of this from a legal standpoint. Like, it's a better documentary. And I'm so sad that less people are going to see it because it's on Starz, and not to demean Starz, but just it doesn't have as big of an audience as HBO does.
Yeah, and I think there's a way in which, it is the Vow is being framed as the prestige version, which
is not true.
It isn't, but I think it's a very useful framing for people like Mark Vicente and the other filmmakers, right? Because these are people who are high up in the organization, and so now, yes, there absolutely is a level of damage control to this kind of project, and so if you can take this kind of dispassionate, distanced view of what happened, then you can minimize the horrible things that happen, and potentially do some preemptive damage control that's necessary. The whole thing is great. I had no intention of doing any deep dives into NXIVM, but then, watched this documentary, and now I'm okay, I need to talk about it constantly.
And this is the third episode that I've talked about this shit on. I'm sorry, everybody.
Just listen, it's not going to get any better until this fourth episode drops. We watch it and then get it out of our systems.
I know, seriously. All right. Well, thanks.
On that note, hope you're all still hanging in there by the time this airs.
Yeah, we hope you're still with us. Thanks for listening to Feminist Frequency Radio. Stay tuned for the freaking after party, which is only available to backers of this podcast. Learn more at patreon.com/femfreak. This show is engineered by Rob Para. Carrie Stimson provides technical support. Artwork by Jamie Varon. And our intro music is by Phil Circus. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye.